I've got a bone to pick with Amazon. The day before yesterday, which would have been Monday, my manager came to me and said, "Hey, we've got a class on about called Protect Your Privacy, and I was wondering if you'd like to attend." Now you got to understand, my shoulder is injured from my job, and so I am on highly restricted duty. The reason for being on highly restricted duty, in which I sit in front of a computer all day and look at receipts, is because when I was put on partial restrictions, they gave me a task that required me to use my left arm. Well, I sensibly decided, well, I'm not going to use my left arm. I'm going to use my right arm to do the job, which is a little bit difficult because I'm pulling empty carts, and the newer versions of the empty carts have nowhere to hold if you use your right hand, except for this in the front side of the cart, where the direction that the cart is traveling. There are a couple of hold bars there, but to hold it, you have to snake your arm around the side and grab a hold of it, which is not good for your shoulder and your muscles and your arm and your back. And so I wasn't doing that. So what I was doing instead is, imagine this is the vertical pole supporting the corner. I was closing my fist, putting my knuckles, I was wearing gloves, impact resistant gloves. I was putting my knuckles here, and then I was taking my other hand, wrapping it around the pole, and using both hands to push those carts. But what I discovered after a day of doing that was that my shoulder hurt more because of that. And so I went to my manager and I said, "Look, this is a problem because I have to use my right arm since my left arm is injured and I'm not supposed to be doing things, and I'm not sure if the carts are within the restrictions that I've been given. So I'm doing it like this, and it's causing me pain." And they said, "Well, just don't move those carts then. Just move the other ones." And so that's what I did. And then I happened to mention it to the one of the safety managers, and he came back and he basically had another safety expert use a force meter to determine whether or not I would be violating my restrictions by using my left arm, and I wasn't in any danger of doing that according to the force meter. I didn't see the data myself, but I trust the men involved in the manager and the other manager to tell me the truth. And so they insisted that I use my left arm. So I started using my left arm, and my shoulder was getting worse. So my doctor put me on full restrictions, which means I can't use my left arm to do anything other than typing on a keyboard, apparently. And I went to the safety specialist who had opened my workers' compensation case and given me that task, which is, it's ironic that task was chosen between him and the computer, because one of the things that caused my injury was pulling full and empty carts every day for 6 months. And so to be assigned a task that basically emulated what caused my injury in the first place was not ideal. But the manager said, "Well, it's not outside of your restrictions, so you need to do it with your left arm." And then, so it doesn't really make sense. So they put me on the full restrictions. So anyways, getting back to the story, that's just a taste of the BS that you deal with at Amazon. And in some ways, Amazon's a really good employer, but in other ways, no. Not the worst I've been at, though. I'll say that. So I thought that this would be a class teaching me how to better protect my privacy, so that, say, hackers and social engineers, con artists, is what we used to call them in the old days, back when the dinosaurs were walking around, because, who knows what a social engineer is? And you don't want to say a con artist about somebody who's a professional social engineer as a white hat penetration tester, for example. So they wouldn't want to be called con artists because they're conning, but they're doing it for good, not for evil. And con artist is purely negative. Sorry, I get sidetracked so easily. So I decided, well, I'd like to attend this class because maybe I'll learn how to protect myself better from hackers and social engineers. And I'm fairly knowledgeable, but I certainly wouldn't call myself an expert. Well, I went in, and the first official comment from the manager who was running the program, and there was another manager in there whom I had no idea who he was, turned out he's from the Las Vegas location, and he's actually a lawyer, a union busting lawyer. His name is Charles Lee. He didn't introduce himself as that, but I did some checking and found that out. And previously, I had gone up to meet the site director to talk to her about something, and I had met another man who I had already been identified as a lawyer, Todd Neerman or something like that. I forget. And he was there. They're both wearing regular blue Amazon badges, which means they're full-time employees. And they're both wearing managers' striped safety vests. So to all intents and purposes, they look like somebody who is a manager possibly visiting from another site, and they are visiting from other sites, but they're posing as members of the employee relations team. But I digress again. I'll explain that later. So the first statement out of the manager's mouth was, "We respect your right to choose whether you want to be in a union or not." And I was like, oh no. I had heard about the closed door meetings in which they try to dissuade you from joining the union, which has not been approved yet because they haven't gotten enough signatures. It's called the Amazon Labor Union of Northern Kentucky. And the premise or the claim that they're making in presenting this information is that it's not about the union, it's not about Amazon, it's just to make sure you understand your rights and how to protect yourself from malicious use of the data you would provide to the union, which is a pretty big jump since the Amazon Labor Union of Northern Kentucky has not even been formed yet and has never existed before because Amazon does everything legal and also illegal things. I have been a personal witness to that. In order to discourage union formation. And in fact, the only Amazon facility that I'm aware of is JFK in New York. And Amazon is taking every legal stalling tactic, just like DHL did, which is across the street, by the way, from where I work, to delay meeting with the union. And then in the presentation, they talk about how it could take a year or more before the labor union sits down with Amazon. And that's only because Amazon refuses to honor the laws of the National Labor Relations Board. They choose to try to manipulate the courts to get what they want to save themselves money. But here's the thing. Amazon earns every year over $200 billion. And they spend millions on union busting activities, including illegal ones. Although I'm thankful to say that they are not engaging in the same kind of tactics of assault and murder like Andrew Carnegie. However, they engage in intimidation. They have lied to immigrant workers and claimed that if you work for Amazon, and you're in the union, you could lose your job and things like that. And immigrants tend not to understand labor laws here. They tend to come from countries where there aren't protections. So it's taking advantage of people who are vulnerable, social engineering. But in this case, we're just be honest and call them con artists. And it's abusive. And there are other things that they've done, like there's a policy at Amazon. I don't know how old it actually is, if it's new or because of unions or if it's old, but but there is this policy that says you can't be in the Amazon building unless you're there for your shift. So outside of your shift time, you're not allowed to be there. And we actually have a work area within our building, and then that's a TSA secured area. And then outside of that, we have a non-work area where there are cafes and places where you can sit and eat, and you can buy from vending machines if you prefer to do that, and bathrooms and locker rooms, which are mostly useless because almost all the lockers either don't have functioning locks or are permanently locked. And I've complained about that, and that's never been dealt with. It's been over a year. Anyways, so yeah. So they make a lot of very clever statements, and they start out by talking about Amazon and all the benefits that Amazon has to offer. Actually, they don't even talk about all of them because there are just too many. And then they talk about all the wins that employees have fought pretty hard for in order to get Amazon to actually implement them. Implementation of any wise, practical suggestion by employees is often resisted for many months unless there is immediate risk of further injury. I am a personal witness to that because when I was pulling carts during that 6 months, I injured my left knee, both either the hamstring or the MCL, and the cartilage on the MCL side of the inside of the inner side of my knee. And as soon as they discovered that had happened and why it had happened, they immediately instituted, but poorly administered, a new rule stating that all carts must be loaded appropriately so that the doors can be closed. And that meant nothing could be sticking out anymore, which is what caused my injury. And it took a few months for that to be properly instituted and guess what happened? A lady at a different facility was pulling a cart that was improperly stacked, a box, and the doors couldn't be closed, and a box fell on her head. And then they got serious about enforcing that rule. Although I've still seen violations, but they are at least more serious about it now that one person at least had their head injury, another person had a knee injury, and supposedly at the time of my knee injury, I was told that I was not the only person who'd been injured because of improper stacking and not closing the doors and stuff. So Amazon tends to avoid being responsible for things. I have worked on safety issues for over a year, and they still are safety issues. Some of them have actually gotten worse. But they made all these claims about all these wins, all these things that Amazon had done because employees suggested them. And it was a very, very short list. I mean, I don't know if they just didn't realize the other things that they've done that came from us, or if there weren't other things, because it's so hard to get them to move on things. And I mean, it's just, I could tell you many stories. Okay, so after that got done regaling us with how wonderful Amazon is, I mean, it was just like a beautiful presentation of all the good of Amazon and none of the bad. They then were very careful to make disclaimers, and that, you can choose to join a union, you can choose not to join a union. Kentucky is allows you the choice of being in a union or not, even if the union is fully formed. And then they make it very clear that even if you're not in a union and something happens, sometimes the union will have to represent you, even though you're not paying union dues and you're not part of a union. And they go on to make claims. Like, for example, they put up a picture of the Amazon Labor Union union membership card, which is something that you can do on that card, or there's a QR code you can scan. You can go to their website and do it there. Either way, it's fully anonymous. It is not revealed outside of the union that this person is a member. You choose whether you want the company to be aware. Like, I have a pin that I wear. Well, when I had a vest to wear, I have a pin that shows that I'm in the union. I'm not ashamed of it. But they point out on the card that it asks for your address. And I signed my union card many months ago, back in, I don't know, maybe April. After careful consideration, I realized I really had nothing to lose by joining the union. unless I was like actively promoting the union, then I put myself a target on my head, target on my back, target on my butt, and so on. But I decided to join, and I signed it, and I could not remember for the life of me if it asked for my address. But on the screen, very large image of the front and back of the card. Now the back, I've got one that was given to me maybe 3 months ago. And on one side, it asks your employment status, any other languages you speak, shift time, area, tenure, schedule, role. Now, when I signed the union membership card, I don't remember that being on there. I certainly didn't see that. However, this is the other side, and as you can see, there is no address space. Now, that doesn't mean that there didn't used to be, but on the current one, there isn't one at all. And as far as I know, they haven't put one in there. So Amazon was deliberately misleading, and they had the nerve to, during the presentation, and also a different manager I spoke to, because when I went the first time and found out it was a union meeting, I walked out. An anti-union meeting, I walked out. But I later went yesterday after talking to that manager that was running that session. And during when I talked to the manager of the first session, he said, "Yeah, the union people might go to your house because they've got your address." Well, no address, and I've never had anybody come to my house. I've had members of the union the organizing committee call me and ask me if I can participate in an event, which usually I can't because I live too far away and I have a 14-year-old son who's getting himself into trouble. But yeah, it was a blatant lie. And, I called out the lawyer who was making this claim during my session after I started making comments at the end, because you're not allowed to say anything until the end of the presentation, by which time you've forgotten what all the slides say because there's so much carefully worded messages designed to discourage your interest in the union. Now, on the one hand, it is good that they're making sure that everybody understands that number one, the Amazon labor union has not yet been formed, and number two, it's not a part of Amazon. It doesn't represent Amazon. It's not within the Amazon leadership structure or anything like that. It is an independent organization. But when I talked to the original manager, he told me a few things. He said it's a third party. Now, the Amazon Labor Union does have a union organizer from a nonprofit organization who's helping the committee. But as far as I know, there's only that one guy, and everybody else is an employee of Amazon or a former employee of Amazon. Now, the former employees of Amazon are not allowed on Amazon property, but the current employees are. And they're the ones who are trying to encourage people to sign up, to support petitions and things like that. And it was very frustrating to hear from him that it's a third party. Well, of course it's a third party. It's a union, but there's an implication behind that. And so I said, started talking to him about that, and I said, you can define third party in a lot of different ways. What do you mean by that? He said, well, a business, and I said, well, I think my understanding is that unions are a nonprofit. He said, well, I have a nonprofit for Goldfish, which was kind of interesting because I used to be in the aquatic pets industry until I discovered that so many people have absolutely no concern about the fish and other aquatic pets. They were like, oh, it died. Oh, get another one. And I was doing that for long enough that I understood that they're way more complicated than we understand. But anyways, so he said, I have a nonprofit dealing with teaching people how to raise goldfish and koi. And so we talked about that a bit, and he said that a nonprofit, a 501c3, which a union is not taxed, and it is a business. I know that for nonprofit 501c3s, you have to file taxes, but it's a tax report. You don't pay taxes. But I looked it up after I was done talking to him because he claimed, based on my statement that it was a nonprofit, that it was a business. And so I looked it up, and no, unions are a 501c5. They are tax exempt, and they are specifically not a business. They don't incorporate into becoming a business. So I made it at the end, when I made my statements, questioning some of the things on the slides. I was, curious about what they would say. They hadn't said anything, which was interesting. So I started making objections to some of the things, the misleading statements and manipulative statements they had made. And the lawyer, who had until that time been completely silent, suddenly started talking and talking over me. And I wasn't done talking. And finally, he was like, well, we're 12 minutes over, so we're going to stop it now. And I was a little pissed off because when I had been told to arrive at 12 for 12:30 meeting. They weren't done at 12:30. They weren't done at 12:40. I waited, I don't know, it was maybe a quarter to before I was actually able to get into the room because the other session was finally ended. But it was very disappointing because he said, does anybody have any questions? And he didn't say anybody else. He said, does anybody have any questions? I have a question. Does anybody have any questions? I have a question. Does anybody have a question? I have a question. Does anybody have a question? Are you going to answer my question or not? I was getting irritated with him because he was being a jerk. And he'd already demonstrated that although he claimed to be a member of the employee relations team, he was very much anti-union and pro-Amazon. Any statement I made about unions that was positive, he said, well, that's your opinion. And so I said, well, in New York City, where there is a union, Amazon has taken every legal tactic they can to delay meeting with them. So that 1 year estimate of how long it'll take for the union to meet Amazon is because of Amazon, not because of the union. Because the statement they made about that implies that it's the union's fault. It's not. The union wants to get in there as quickly as possible. It doesn't matter which union. It's Amazon and DHL and these other big companies that don't want a union, and they therefore interfere legally and illegally often. I mean, DHL was called out by a judge who said what you did was illegal when they were intimidating their employees across the street. So it's, and at other things. And then DHL recently, I discovered, actually took some employees from the location across the street to a different location to help, but they didn't inform them there was a union strike happening at that site. So they tricked their union employees to become scabs, which are people who cross the picket line to work, and they didn't know. And that was, that's very sad. Very pathetic of DHL, and I hope they get slapped with a huge fine. It's not like they can't afford it. I mean, they charge extremely high rates for shipping things, and they can certainly afford it. So he said, I don't know. I kind of find that pretty suspicious because he's there arguing against unions, making statements and claiming that it's your opinion when I was stating facts that I was aware of, and basically dismissing me to make me look invalid. And yet he didn't know it was a business, not a business. So I said, well, it's a 501c5, it's tax exempt, and it's not a business. And he didn't say anything. And except for, I'll talk to you afterwards. And so I sat there while everybody else left because nobody else had anything to say or ask. And they all file out. And I say, so, okay, I'm ready to talk. And he said, no, we got to start another session. I can come and meet you. Where are you located? And so I told him where I was. And he said he would see me later. And remember, he said he would talk to me afterwards. Okay. So later, I'm up at my desk working on the computer. He comes over and he says, do you want to talk? And I said, yeah. And at that point, he asked me if it was okay if I sat down. I said, yeah, you wanted to talk to me. Yeah, go ahead. I mean, that's what you're here for. He said, no, I thought I'm here because you wanted me to talk to you. I said, no, you told me in the meeting that you wanted to talk to me. So we had a pleasant conversation about our mutual interest in martial arts and technology and stuff. And then we got down to the nitty gritty of it. And again, he was dismissing my factual statements about the website and the lack of improvement in Amazon shopping experience. I mean, shopping, not post-purchase, as opinions. I said, no, it's the same as it was when I started using Amazon years ago. And I started using it, I think, 2017 or 2018. And he was dismissing me even on the subject of lack of improvement in the quality of the shopping experience. And that was irritating. And so finally, I said to him, look, I don't think it should have been called Protect Your Privacy, because it's not about privacy. It is about the union. He said, no, the point of it is to let people know that, blah, 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 blah. And it wasn't what the real point was. In fact, the majority of the presentation is about Amazon, not about the union, because they want Amazon to look perfect and they want to cast doubt on the union. So I said, no, the union is not the main point. The main point was you making Amazon look all wonderful. And so he just kept on trying to manipulate me. He's not a particularly brilliant guy. I mean, he's okay, but I was aware of his tricks. And so he's like, well, that's your opinion, and that you can believe that if you want to. And so he stated an actual opinion instead of a fact. And I said, well, that's your opinion, and I'm going to disagree with you on that. And just kind of using his own words against him, which I thought was kind of fun. But I said, you shouldn't be calling this Protect Your Privacy, because that says you're going to teach us about privacy related to Amazon, and it was just about trying to discourage people from being in the union. So it's ridiculous, and I'm really disappointed in Amazon's childish and illegal behavior. I and many other union people have been given warnings that are directly or indirectly tied to union forming activities that are protected by national law. And Amazon could win in this situation if they would take a completely different approach. I have been trying for weeks to try to address that matter, and I have been trying for over a year to get Amazon to become the world's best employer, which is their claim that they want. It's one of their new leadership principles. Oh, by the way, there are 17 leadership principles, and do you know where they post them? Only in the training rooms. They're called day one training rooms. You will not see the leadership principles anywhere else in the building. Even though I brought it up early this year, even though I brought it up in this summer too, and I brought it up to my senior operations manager multiple times, it's still only in the training rooms. What does that tell you? It should tell you that it's propaganda only. And in my opinion, based on my almost 2 years of experience with management at Amazon, it is propaganda, because I see a lack of accountability, which is one of the principles. Accountability. Another principle is ownership. If you get a task, you take ownership of it. I've seen them pass the buck on me multiple times, and the list just goes on and on. And it's just absolutely stupid. One final note. The lady giving the presentation was a year ago in December. She was a member of the employee relations team, which is the team that comes in and gets feedback from the associates and the team leaders, which are called process assistants, and even management, about what's right and what's wrong in the building. And that becomes a report that's compiled and submitted to the general manager, the director, and certain other people, which is then filtered down to the managers for them to address. And I told her and another member of the team at that time, also a team that visited in April and another team that visited, I think, in June, about the problems. And from that time to this, it's basically stayed the same, although some of the worst managers have been transferred Catholic Church style to other facilities. But the vast majority of the complaints that I and other people have made about the way Amazon does things for employees, it has remained the same. So it was ironic that she shortly after being in the ERT team, or ERT, the employee relations team, she became a manager at our facility, moving from a different facility where she was a manager as well. And so it was ironic to have a union busting lawyer in the same room with a former employee relations team member, and he was claiming to be part of the ERT. But when I asked him about the report, he had absolutely no knowledge. Now, I know that if he was really a member of the ERT, he would know about that, because every ERT member that I talked to about the report knows about the report. So these are plants. They're there to discourage and confuse the employees. And, Amazon could take that money and do good for the employees instead of wasting that money, taking it from the employees, taking it from the shareholders, and just causing problems and breaking the law. And, I'm just fed up. So thank you so much for watching. And please, I am currently boycotting Amazon, even though it costs me money. And I hope that you will also join me in boycotting Amazon to show support for all the employees who, including some of the management, who are very frustrated with the way Amazon does business. I'm currently going through an appeals process, which has been a joke thus far, just like the retaliation process I went through and an ethics complaint, 2 ethics complaints that I went through. It's a joke. HR is a joke. So if you don't mind, please don't buy anything from Amazon if you can possibly avoid it. I understand that you may not be able to financially avoid using alternative sites, but if you can, please just don't don't buy things from Amazon, and please send the messages to encourage them politely. Please don't be rude, to stop breaking the law, and to allow the unions to form if that's what they want to do, or at least figure out a way to make the employees happy so that the unions don't need to form. And that would require Amazon's management to actually do their job right. Anyways, I have to go to work at Amazon now, which is why I'm dressed like this. So thanks again. I really appreciate you taking the time to listen to this whole thing. I can't believe you did. It's amazing. And you're amazing. Have a wonderful day.